Film is like a wild journey. I definitely am a director that comes to the table very well prepared, and usually I'm creating my own work and my own feature films. So I've had it in this brain of mine for probably 5 years minimum by the time we get financed and go to camera. So there's an aspect where I'm definitely very prepared, and I'm somebody that comes to the table with my binder and my shot list all very organized in the most idealistic film that could be created, barring, weather hiccups, budget constraints, gear malfunction, and sort of in an order of priority. So the shot list transforms, and it always does. And so that's where the collaboration comes in, because when you're on set, it's such a moving beast that you just have to ride the waves, and every second is unpredictable. Literally, every second is unpredictable. So you definitely very early on have to understand that the binder is an amazing blueprint, although it kind of gets put to the side because real life and connections with actors and interactions and locations, whatever it might be, definitely all present themselves in the present moment in a different way than you ever thought, or close, but there's always some sort of unique, real, breathable, tangible thing that makes film so exciting to capture, is because it can never be exactly the same in two takes. And so it's a very collaborative process once you're on set, because it takes an army to make a movie. And it's a lot about decision making and quick decision making. There's the prep that goes into your material ahead of time, so your script inside and out, and hopefully your actors, and you're able to rehearse, so the personality types as well. You've had some time with your key creatives, so you know how to communicate best with your team, and hopefully those hiccups have sort of ironed themselves out through prep. And then once you hit the floor, it's the Wild West. You've got to really stay focused on getting your day, keep the team encouraged and moving forward, and giving their best selves, which I love watching the key creatives excel and challenge them in ways creatively to bring out like new, exciting and risky things that they might have not tried before under time crunch, where we're all huddled in trying to make a decision when there's a lightning storm and it's 15 minutes away. We have two takes to a crane shot that used to be kind of a walk on walk off shot, and now what are we going to do to make it still innovative and fabulous? And you have to make a decision very quickly and move very fast and very forward, in order to make your days. And that's just sort of what happens on set. For me, it's my instincts. Every decision I make is almost like coming from somewhere else. I have instincts. I've done my prep work. I've put years and years. My tool belt is really heavy, and I trust my instincts on set. I trust my instincts on whether to turn left, right, go up the hill, go down the hill. My instincts play a huge part in that, and I feel like that came with experience, only through riding the wave that is making a film and an indie film on vast different budget levels, and through television and film, and you know literally just being thrown in the water against the current. You get this sort of rhythm going where I'm very much so invested in the film and in the project and in the present moment that I feel invincible. Like, I have no fear, I have no worry. I just drive forward with the instincts that I've been given, which it's an incredible feeling to be so present and just know exactly how to navigate the waters. I sometimes, at the end of the day, I'm recutting everything in my head. Is there anything we missed? Is there anything I need for tomorrow? And I'm just kind of like, how did, it's kind of like an out of body experience sometimes. Usually I have such a great handle on the script and the blocking and, the scene prior and the scene post and sort of the vision of the film as a whole. I listen to them. I want to always include them, and I want them to feel heard, but usually I try to explain the big picture of the feature, and usually in the big picture they're like, oh, I get it now. It's not like sort of a microcosm of only a 1 minute, which will become probably 15 seconds in the edited screen version of the film. I try to really give them a grand picture of where it was coming from. This is the scene we're coming from. This is transition in, and this is why I have a wide here in the scene previous. So I want to start on this extreme close. And I think if my vision is so clear, I feel like they they trust that, and they just are excited and say, yeah, let's go. Okay, I get it. But there's always creative differences as well, and that's a different thing. That's a totally different thing. And I love the differences. Everybody sees the world in such a unique lens, and the differences are what make us special. And I think in a film, whether you're the costume designer, the makeup artist, or the colorist, and you're the editor, everybody does put their heart and their talent into the film, and it is a group effort. And creatively, you're not always aligned. There has to be a lot of communication to sort of keep the vision at least succinct and thorough enough so that you have a product that doesn't feel like a melting pot of a bunch of different, concepts and creative ideas that might feel in the end like a film that it doesn't have a voice, or it's weak, or there's too much going on. And so I'm, very conscious of that. But I love fresh ideas. And if there's a great idea that comes from one of the department heads, I'm so accepting and love to collaborate. It's part of what we do. Interesting. I think personally, in my personal career, it seems to come either in pre-production, because pre-production's a funny thing. You're all envisioning something in your heads that is based on paper and words. So everybody's vision and imagination is so dramatically different than one another. I think in prep there can be some miscommunications because there's not a tangible visual example of what people are talking about, and people are sort of confused of like, especially if you're trying to do something really innovative and new, it could be very confusing if it's never been done before or seen before, and I was trying to do overlays and certain things sometimes with old negatives, and I was trying to explain that, and it just seems like sometimes that just goes right over everybody's head, but it's not their fault. It's like I see it in my head, and then I'll give visual references and pictures, and I'll try to find videos of some kind that sort of, if they're amalgamated, this is what it would represent. Like I try really hard to give visuals because I think that's the best language for at least me to communicate my ideas to the crew. In my shot list binder, I have visual references, I have a visual board. When I'm pitching for features or when I'm coming up with new ideas, I put visual examples all over my office, whether I'm on, if I'm on a TV show, there's visual, brand new visual images all over the office. And if it's a feature, I usually start collecting photographs and images and examples, or taking videos of those key moments that I feel like define the film really early on, because I find like they really inspire me. And so those travel with me all the way through till prep. And then finally they're shared with the crew. And I sort of say, this is the color palette I've been envisioning. And I definitely use visual boards and references. Like, that's like my main thing, because it's so much easier for me than words. We went to New Mexico early on for prep, so I really got to feel the land and be a part of the land and the color palette, and be with the landscape, which was such a huge personality and character in Wander because it had a lot to do with the storyline. And I had been gathering photographs again, and even music plays a big part. Like I was shot listing to Johan Johansson for 5 years, not knowing if we'd ever get or afford the song at the very end of the film, whether we would get that. But it felt like the spirit of Wander, the vibes of Wander, and anything that has that vibe and that magic that can keep me motivated, for 5 years and bring me to a finish line and bring me to those moments. I love holding on to those early on, and I was collecting images on my desktop for, a good 4 years for Wander. I've had the greatest gift by meeting my producing and writing partner early on in my career. And Tim Doiron and I went to theater school together, and our clowns, believe it or not, we did clown class with a red nose and everything. Our clowns connected creatively on a level that just, I can't even describe it, but creatively we're on the same wavelength. And we knew it in that moment. And it was just such a, to be able to have that gift early on and connect to someone that was just as driven and just as passionate and also had the same sort of creative wavelength made us a dynamic duo that was kind of unstoppable. Like, you know, in the beginning, we started with, you know, a tiny little micro budget feature when the world, you know, was completely shut down and there was the writer's strike and the pilots weren't getting made that year in Los Angeles. We came together and said, let's make a movie, and it can't be a short, it's got to be a feature, and we'll be in it and let's see how it goes. And we shot it in 7 days, very, you know, blindly ambitious, wildly, you know, ambitious. And we got there and made it work. And when one's down, the other brings the other up. And it's sort of like this balancing act of constantly, because it is extremely, especially your first feature, when you're, you know, I'm playing not only the costume designer, makeup artist, I'm also, you know, the second AD and also acting and directing. And he's, you know, a million other, you just sort of, you make it work. We've worked together on, you know, 6 films, and through the thick and thin of, like, you know, whether it be 3D, a comedy or a thriller, and, you know, not finding our lead actor and then somebody drops out at the last minute. We've been through sort of the gamut of everything you could imagine together, and we're still going strong, and that's just like an unbelievable partnership. So I would say one of the greatest gifts of synchronicity in terms of imagination was that we found each other very early on and never gave up on one another, and learned to communicate, even though it was very challenging situations. And sometimes, like, we're, you know, there's not, you know, sometimes things don't work out and we're really heated and we're really passionate because we're both super passionate people, but there's so much love for what we do and so much respect that it, you know, we're on to the next. Always we're like, okay, what's next? What did we do wrong? What are we going to learn? How can we get back up? You know? Dead Before Dawn 3D was Canada's, you know, first stereoscopic 3D feature film, and it was also the lowest budget 3D film ever made, for $1.1 million. And it was a feature, and it was fiction, and the technology at the time didn't exist for what we needed. So we put together a quasar rig and put a Red 1 camera horizontal and one vertical in the middle of summer, and it worked. It was working. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience. But because it was new technology and the cameras were so big and nobody had done it before, lo and behold, camera A overheated camera B. So left and right eye kept overheating one another. So we had like air conditioning units on the camera. It was the biggest diva on set, and ice packs along the sides of the camera. And getting to the finish line of Dead Before Dawn and then actually being able to see it, you know, in Belgium live with 3D glasses, and see the 3D that we created with what we had in such a small team. There was only like 25 of us, with such a huge undertaking, one that I don't even know. It's glad we didn't know what we were getting into, because you just can't. You just have to jump full force off the diving board. The good news was there was a lot of workshops going on. So Tim and I did a lot of workshops leading up to the shoot, because it was new technology and everybody was hoping to try it and wanted to try it. No one was attempting a feature yet. And then Jeff Packer, our stereographer, came on board. He had never done a feature either, but he had done shorts and little promo types with Red Lab. Now, Red Lab wasn't equipped for 3D because it was too expensive at the time. And Resident Evil came in and wanted to do 3D. And as serendipitous as the film industry could ever be, the movie gods were with us, and Resident Evil, because of the little testers that we had done with Dead Before Dawn 3D, the 3-minute little teaser we did with Red Lab to showcase the 3D that we had achieved, got them the gig of Resident Evil, which was a huge studio film, which then allowed the facility to be updated and ready for processing of a 3D, you know, dailies and 3D feature film. So we were able to come in and do our feature and finish the feature before Resident Evil, but it was sort of, you know, had they not been able to help in terms of getting the facility ready, it was just unaffordable for a film that size to start from, you know, nothing. There was so many new requirements needed to process that 3D image, which was a very serendipitous time. first of all, the camera was so heavy it couldn't move. Like all I could do was dolly and, you know, wides and landscape. You know, you're not handheld or anything at the time. So, and also with 3D, I was really excited and inspired to bring to the table something new because we were an indie film and I knew we were going to be low budget. We were going to have to offer something vastly different than the big budgets could because we were never going to be able to do like Transformers and 3D explosions and cars coming right at you. So you know, we approached it with a very immersive kind of 3D feel where I kind of shot list according to 3D the entire time. So from script level, my shot list was based entirely in a 3D landscape. And I really tried to make it as immersive as possible. So I held on much longer takes. And so I would have the actors blocking be a lot more very specific. And so they would sort of travel through the space and there was like 6 or 5 of them on the screen at the same time. And I would just sort of, you know, slow push in and it was a much more enjoyable process. The audience could sort of feel like they were inside of the environment and experiencing the 3D landscape and world around them without it being like too choppy and gimmicky and things coming flying at your face. It was more of like an artistic choice of kind of being immersed in 3D and sort of see what that could give us. It had never been really done before, and I strayed away from close-ups and profiles and things that I knew the 3D wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't give us much. It wouldn't give us sort of the feeling and the vibe that I wanted for the immersive feel. So definitely with Dead Before Dawn, what came first was thinking about 3D and the technology and the outcome and the frames and how to move through a space with a 3D feel and vibe and how that will cater, you know, the blocking to that. And then the creative things came after that. So it was almost like then the production design followed, then the music, then the casting, then the color coordination of like making sure that the person in the negative space wasn't wearing like lime yellow and the person at the back was wearing like dark blue, because you kind of want to balance also the colors of the background with your actors so they don't look too 2D sticking out in the landscape. So there was so much more to think of. A little bit of both. Because you have to be artistic in order to envision new, unique ways of kind of having either props set in different spaces or actors move in different spaces. You can really have a lot of fun with that. And that to me is like an art form. And then the science behind it is everything else. Like, you know, especially that sometimes the eye, from cut to cut, you have to really be careful from going to like a medium to a big wide shot. Sometimes it really plays tricks on your eyes and you have to make sure you're not making the audience feel sick at any time. And you really want to be conscientious of not jumping the line, the axis too quickly and going into like a really 3D space and then to a more kind of 2D space. You have to, that part's the science part. There's a lot of technical aspects that go into it and it just definitely slows you down on set, but you get to be just as creative and create out of this world images that you sometimes can't create on Earth. So you know, coming up with this mirrored box where someone can walk through a mirror and come through another world on the other side and being able to design things much grander than real life, I definitely love. And I do think, you know, there'll be a balance of people and audiences that love good old-fashioned entertainment, and then there's going to be, you know, the new generation of probably, I would imagine, not only immersive but, you know, total, you know, surround 360 entertainment experience will probably happen in our lifetime. So in pre-production you really have to be clear with what the end result and the desire is. So I again kind of approach it with a lot of images and usually explain things if I have to with props, or, you know, I'll draw as well. Sometimes my drawings aren't that great, they're stick figures, but it definitely helps in terms of what I want to show, especially if something's a really complicated, you know, a huge complicated VFX sequence where I'll need sort of all of the teammates on board in terms of the VFX, the actors have to understand it, and then especially the post house has to understand it, and the editor has to understand what my cutting is. I will knock on a story editor, and story artist will come to the office, and I'll go through the whole thing with the story artist and show him the location and sort of my blocking, and then also I'll have him design a rough sketch visual of what the final VFX shots would look like, just so that the whole team can just look at like a 12-page document, flip through it, and they're like, oh, I get it. It's like, on set, you don't have the luxury of kind of explaining to 100 people exactly how the VFX are going to come together in terms of like, this is the shot I need and this is why. So I find it a lot easier to fully storyboard those parts. Right now, we're putting together a sci-fi feature called Hello Stranger, and it's at script level, and we haven't even gone out to cast yet, but I'm already in talks with a VFX post-house, and we're already trying to figure out how we want to do this really special shot in the film, and it takes a lot of planning. So I usually, before we're even like up and running and greenlit and the budget's going, if there's something extremely complicated, I'll go to the team really early to see if it's even possible. Like, this is the idea we have, this is what's in the script, and this is what we're wondering if this is possible in, in the VFX world. And also I work with the VFX if it is pretty tedious and a big part of the film. They're there the whole time. Like, I kind of make sure that they see the locations, make sure that they're there walking the sets with me. I tell them the blocking and I say, where's our pick point? If the green screen's going to be there, does that work for you? Let's see where the sun's at this time of day. Trying to really navigate all the different elements to make their job easier and make sure we don't shoot too much or too little, and make sure that on the post side, we'll be able to deliver the VFX that we need to achieve the gags that are becoming, audiences are expecting a lot more from everybody with VFX, because the bar is being set so high that you really have to bring it. You got to bring your game. So Wander, we made it to the finish line, which was already such a huge finish line to make it to. And right in the middle of post-production, when we locked picture and we were so excited to meet all of our deadlines, COVID hit in March, and everything was shut down completely in Canada. We were at a standstill, and that's when we were supposed to go into color correction and sound design, and all facilities were on complete lockdown. So they were closed completely. So we had a full month where our hands were tied and we were just completely handcuffed to the pandemic. And of course, there are bigger things going on in the world, and you have to abide by keeping people safe. That's the most important thing. And at that time, everything changed, although we knew we had a film to deliver and deliver on time. So we started brainstorming. And luckily, because we had worked with Red Lab Digital before on our previous, 5 films, we sort of reached out to them and said, look, we have a deadline mostly for financing and finances where we can't miss this deadline. I know the pandemic's happening. I know that you can't be open to public. Is there something we can start prepping on now so that the minute you're able to have even one person in there, or is there something remote that we could do in the meantime to sort of get the film going and not lose, whether it be 2 to 6 months of post-production? So right away we reached out. They were kind enough to reach back, and they're looking into ClearView and how ClearView could help us work remotely over the pandemic and COVID and get the film delivered on time, which was crucial. And the best part was, creatively, I had worked with the colorist before on several features, and I sent over my visual color palette of what I was hoping to get the film to. So he was able to say, okay, he was allowed to go into the office, but there was no one else was allowed to be in the office because of the pandemic. But he was in the office, and we were allowed, to watch him through ClearView. So we were synced up at home on my home device, and ClearView allowed us to communicate and be together and watch the same images, sort of render the color and change the color in the spaces that we needed. And it was live. It was never done before. I had never done, remote color correcting before, and neither had our colorist Walt. It was a first for everybody, and it went really well. It went pretty smoothly, except being in the room is the best, because that's where you want to be. You want to collaborate and discuss. But for what we had to do and what we had to deliver, it was the best alternative at the time, and it went so well. and we were able to color correct remotely. I was in Niagara Falls, Tim was in Los Angeles, Walt was in Toronto, three producers were in Hamilton, one was in Texas. Everybody sort of joined in and got to watch the live color correction over the span of 2 weeks live through ClearView, and it was a smooth experience, and we were so grateful to be able to still work on the film and still achieve our deadlines, which were fast approaching. So for ADR, that was probably the most challenging, doing that remotely, because being with the actors and directing the actors in the room is part of it, and sort of being able to look at them and communicate with them and be beside them through that experience is a lot easier for sure. But we did, Tommy Lee Jones was out in New Mexico at the time, and we did his ADR session through a remote session that was hooked up through our post house. So I was on Skype, he was on Skype, but then I was also able to be on my computer and watch the screen and the playback. So we make sure that everything's synced up, and then I was looking after performance, and it worked out really well. Of course, a legend like Tommy Lee Jones had never done something remote and so technologically savvy, but he was game for it. He was ready for it. He understood. He was the only one in there because of the pandemic. He just showed up. They already had pressed record, and we just recorded the entire session. And then with Aaron was in Montana, and I got to do his session remotely, and his was a big session because he was obviously in every single shot of the film. So it was like a 6-hour session because of it being remote and trying to get it perfect. But we made it work, and Catherine Winnick was in Los Angeles, and I was in Canada at the time, and then Heather Graham was in New York. So we had a lot of very internationally, remote friendly ADR sessions that worked, and it was successful over the pandemic, and it was right at the height of everything, and they were just kind of, it was new. The pandemic was new. The idea of being alone in the recording studio was new, but we all really were passionate to make it work and make it work for the film and deliver. So everybody was a good sport about it, and brought their performance. There were some benefits. I would say I do think that now some prep, work could be done from home, where you don't have to fly across, you don't have to fly across the world to do some meetings. And I think it's been very advantageous to not have to fly to do general meetings and meetings for jobs. And it's been a lot easier, even in terms of communicating with actors and sort of speaking to actors in, pre-production world. I think that's been extremely beneficial to open the dialogue, start the dialogue, but nobody has to fly anywhere to meet anywhere. We could just be a lot more accustomed to just now being over the screen. Although the rest, I don't know. I really love being in person. My tool belt as an actor is so weighted with so many different, options to communicate with actors, whether it's, somebody who likes to do method or Stanislavski, or whether somebody, wants to sort of be left alone. I kind of definitely, after spending 15 years as an actor, watching and being communicated to as an actor, it has helped me immensely to have had the benefit of understanding how vulnerable you have to be as an actor, even if the role doesn't require what you would think is vulnerability, like the transparency and vulnerability of what you're going to give, and how stripped down you feel always on set. I come to them with support, and I always know, how to approach and listen to them and make sure they're heard and their ideas are supported. And I think they all thrive in that setting because luckily I have had so much training as an actor that I'm like, there's a big understanding, like we get it. For Below Her Mouth, we had a mission, and that was to create the most pure female perspective possible when it came to sex, intimacy, and a relationship, with the lens that would be definitely geared towards women. and the female gaze. I think it was a lot quieter on set, and that might have been the content, but it also was like, you know, almost, it felt to me that it was like almost like a very serendipitous kind of wave movement where one, key would come over and talk to the other crew, and it was always through like kind of quietly whispering and figuring things out, and everybody was intertwined. Like the jobs weren't as specifically defined as like I only do this. It felt like there was a lot more communication between departments, and it was pretty quiet, and everybody sort of was very focused. It felt very focused on set. It might have just been the dynamic of the film and the sensitivity of the content, but it was also, it just felt, you know, very, it was really nice, and really it was quiet and intimate, and a very strong sense of camaraderie and working together. There was no judgments. There was no pointing fingers at anybody. Everybody was just trying to achieve the best day possible and help one another. Early on as an actor, I had some tremendous experiences. I got to work with David Cronenberg, who uh, has such a poise and grace and intellect about him. And I found him to be such a strong listener. And it wasn't the idea of sort of what I had in mind of a director, which is like loud, abrasive, and kind of charging. He had this gorgeous sensibility about him, and humility, and he was humble, and really came to each actor and really talked to us personally one at a time, and made the crew laugh. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I just, there was this preconceived notion of, somebody screaming action, like you have no idea when you're really young what actually happens in the film industry, except for these funny cartoons where you see somebody in a big blowhorn and you're like, oh, is that what they do? But he was a phenomenal Canadian talent and icon, well, global icon. And so I was lucky enough to work alongside David Cronenberg, and be touched by his very gracious personality. And also had a great experience with Lisa Kolodankro, a female director, early on in my acting career. And I had never been directed by a woman before. And she too was gracious and open, and always attentive, and came up to the actors and was really interactive, and intertwined in the production. And I asked her, I said, is there any way I could just sit behind the monitors all day? Like, I don't want to go back to my trailer. As an actor, you usually go back to your trailer. I said, after my take, could I just sit behind the monitors and just be a sponge and observe? And at the time, I didn't know if I was, going to be a director at all. I just knew that I wanted to learn as much as possible through being close to her, and watching her work, and watching the screen, and watching the actors, and just be immersed on set. And she was like, yes, are you kidding me? You can just take a seat. You can stay by the monitor all day. So I never left the monitor. I would do my scenes, and I would, rather than go back and relax in my trailer, I was always just, behind her shoulder at the monitor. And it was a huge learning curve, for sure. My parents would say I was born a director. And I didn't know this at the time. I was like 6 and 7 years old. I would gather up all the troops from the neighborhood. I would put them in costumes. I would tell them the script. I would have La Bamba playing, and I would invite the parents, and I would put on an incredible spectacle, which I thought was like a 10 out of 10. Who knows what it actually was, but in my mind, it was these enormous productions for the parents, and it would happen once a month, and I would prep all the neighborhood kids. Some of them were 3 years old, some of them were 12, and some of them hit their marks, and some of them didn't care about what was happening, but I was so serious about getting the show and the production value right, and making it exciting and entertaining and innovative. So my parents always laugh, and they're like, we knew you were going to be a director, like way long before, when you're like, I want to go to acting class. They're like, sure, no problem. I'm from a small town in Niagara Falls where, film and the film industry doesn't really exist. And I was determined at the age of, 9, to hunt down some sort of acting classes, and then start making feature films in my hometown, just by sheer desire and tenacious energy to just create. It was just in me. I feel like it chose me before I even knew that there was a choice, and now I'm just completely addicted. I have this complete infatuation with moments and time and how time disintegrates and can't be captured. And I was obsessed with that concept from a very young age. And I remember thinking the smallest of moments when the sun sort of is hitting your cheek and you're 7 years old laying in tall grass and there's a breeze, like how can you capture that? And why is memory fleeting? And how do you allow those experiences to be shared with other people? And is it done through photograph or moving image? And at the time I didn't know. It was just kind of like this obsession with feeling so uh, almost like a real true feeling of not wanting the present moment to be fleeting. Like I didn't like that it was fleeting, that everything just, I could watch the sand come through my hands and it was over. And film sort of has this incredible ability to capture moments, and like whether those two moments are magical between two actors, and capture the sunset at this very specific time of day, and the feelings and the sounds of the world at that time, or something so small of like someone tying someone's shoe for somebody. I don't know, I just became so enamored by the fact that you could capture it and that you could play it back and you could have it for eternity. I absolutely love working in TV because you get to do so many different genres in such a short time frame, and you get to work with new people, and it's kind of like these short little chapters, whereas a film is incredible but very long-winded and takes motivation for years and years and years to finally come into fruition and to stay motivated for one single goal for so long. Doing TV really gets, keeps you on your toes. You get to immerse yourself into a totally different genre, whether it be dance or sci-fi or a thriller or, a comedy. It's so nice to just have a short time frame to exercise your muscles. And, with TV, you always have so many incredible people around you. The crew's much bigger, the support system's bigger, the budgets are bigger. You have every toy you want within reason, and you're usually, shooting with the crew that's been working on the same show for at least a year or more, and the cast really know their characters inside and out because they've been on the show for a while. So it's just very refreshing. I say it's like summer camp. TV is fantastic now. You can approach the showrunner with some really cool ideas, like for Lethal Weapon in Los Angeles, which is very much an action based series, very established with huge, show. I wanted to do pop zooms with the car chase, and I thought they'd be really cool, but they're from like, our DP was like, they're so old fashioned. I was like, yeah, but it's cool. I want to do pop zooms with a wicked car chase through Los Angeles. And we did it. I pitched it to the showrunner. The showrunner said, go ahead, try it. Have a backup just in case, so you have some safeties. But I got to do it, and then they loved it in the final cut, and the pop zooms are in there. It's so cool. The April Mullen stamp, when fans and amazing audience members and viewers always talk about like this was an obvious April Mullen episode. I don't know, like I think it's the colors, the passion. I'm obsessed with transitions and detail oriented and fast paced, and I love kind of looping scenes and making sure that they're all really in sync with one another. I love immersing myself in completely different things that make me, completely out of my element. Like I love a challenge. And if it's something way out in left field like that I had never done before, and when I read the script to Below Her Mouth, I was like blushing the entire time and I couldn't believe what I was reading. But for that very reason alone, I was like, I have to do this. It makes me feel uncomfortable and nervous. Like I must take on this challenge and see if I can bring some truth and some beauty to all of this. I'm so excited. I love diving very deep into very extremely different genres. People think it's really funny that Wander is the follow-up to Below Her Mouth, and then I did a greaser gangster film, Badsville, which was like very male and very like physical and a lot of violence, and they all are so polarizingly different. But I think I really don't want to confine myself to one thing. I'm just a lover of film. I'm a lover of film and a lover of creation and a lover of moments and creating really unique worlds.